A couple of weeks ago, I had some people reach out and they wanted me to transform their current furniture into something completely different. So I gave them a quote, we agreed on a price, and I went and picked it up from their home, brought it back here to the shop, unloaded it, and here we are ready to take on this massive project. Hey everybody, welcome back to Furniture Flipping Teacher. I'm Lauren and I am so excited to share this video with you. We are going to be using a couple of new techniques that I've never tried before and I'm super excited to see how they go. My customers want me to take this dark and drab furniture and turn it into a much lighter, brighter, kind of like a Pottery barn finish. So stick around and I'm going to show you some new techniques. Let's remove some hardware. Okay, I'm so excited. I have not done this method before, but I have seen it done. So I'm sure you're wondering, wait, you only took off the hardware. Why are you moving on to like the next step without cleaning? Well, I am going to be stripping this set. And so I figured that I don't need to go ahead and clean because the stripper is going to basically clean for me. And plus, this set is honestly super clean already. I think the clients cleaned it before I went and picked it up. So we are good to go on that front. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna be removing the finish. And instead of sanding down all of the finish, getting into all the grooves with my sander, which I still will have to use the sander in a little bit, but this method is going to start the process for me so that I don't have to sand as much. But it's not a typical furniture stripper. We're actually gonna be using acetone. So I got a couple of large, like, 1 gallon jugs of the acetone, and this is going to remove the finish super quick, and it's gonna be a lot less of a mess than stripper. And you're not gonna have to, I'm not gonna have to wait for it to work. It's pretty much fast acting stripper. So I am going to go ahead and glove up. I'll probably go through multiple glove sets because this stuff can kind of melt through the gloves, but I'll just really pay attention to that. And then I need a mask and I do need some glasses as well. I've also got my garage door opened up. I'm lucky because today is actually a nicer day. It's like 45 degrees, so it's okay to have that open, but I want to be in a well-ventilated area because the acetone is pretty strong. Got my glasses on now. And then another thing that you may want to use is a brush, especially like on the drawer fronts and stuff where there's crevices and corners. That's going to be a really good spot to use those. So all you're going to do, and then I also have my paper towel box here. I got a brand new box, plenty of paper towels. Here we go. What we're gonna do, I'm gonna pour a little bit of acetone in this bucket. And then I've got a chip brush here, kind of spilled on my surface a little bit, but that's okay because we're gonna be spreading it around on the surface anyway. So I'm gonna take my brush here and then we're just gonna start applying the acetone across the surface here. Doesn't need to be too thick, but we just need good coverage. And then it will basically just start to dissolve the finish. You want to kind of keep it wet so that it can work, but then you also don't want to keep it on there for too long, or else it could potentially eat through like the wood as well. So then you're just going to take a paper towel and start to, well, I can also start to use my little scrub brush. You can also kind of dump some on there too. This is totally a learning curve for me, and one thing I'm learning already is that I do think that it's gonna be better to work in smaller areas first and wipe it back before it dries up, or else it's gonna get super sticky and then it's kind of pointless. So I'm gonna start working in smaller sections instead of the larger sections. But it seems to be working. It's just probably still gonna take a while. Hey, moving and grooving. Got the top of the tall dress or the long dresser all finished up. I think it took me around like 25 minutes or so of actual work time. I'm gonna actually time the top of this nightstand because I'm kind of curious of how long it takes like the flat surfaces. But it definitely went way faster when I did like one section at a time. So that's what I'm gonna do on this. I am finding that using the scrubby, even on the flat surfaces, does help too. All right, that took me 12 minutes to do the top here. So not too shabby. I'm gonna move on to the top of the next one. The tops are just the quickest right now. So I'm gonna get all the tops done first and then we'll move on to like the body and the drawers and all that fun stuff. I'm gonna continue to keep track of time. So right now we are about 37 minutes in on stripping. So I've got the tops all stripped back with the acetone, and that took me about an hour and 15 minutes just for the tops. So, I don't know. It's like much less messy than stripper in my opinion, and then I don't know if it would take longer to like sand them back, like all 3 sanding grits. But the only thing is with sanding them, like starting at a higher grit or lower grit, like a more coarse grit, would be that I'm pretty sure that this is like a veneer top. And so I would be really nervous to, you know, bust through the veneer, especially with the look that I'm going for. And the fact that this is a custom set, I don't want to mess anything up. So I'm taking that extra step and stripping it with the acetone before I sand. But now that the tops are done, like I still have a lot to go on stripping the rest of them, but I wanted to take a break from stripping and do some sanding on the tops just to see what the final wood look is going to look like before I do any like paint wash or stain. So I've got my Surf Prep hand sander here, and it's always connected to my Surf Prep dust extractor over there, and it's self-cleaning, super nice, and it takes the dust right out of the air because it's connected to that vacuum. This is 180 grit, so it's not a very coarse grit at all, but we're just gonna get the residue off and just smooth things out all the way. So that was super easy. That took me maybe like 1.5 minutes or something like that because I took the time to do the acetone. Usually what takes the sanding so long is to get through like the top or the finish, not necessarily the stain. The finish is that protective layer, like we do top coats over the top of everything. That's what we're kind of trying to get through. And so since I did the acetone to get rid of the finish, and then it also gets rid of some of the color, it's gonna take a lot less time to, you know, sand the rest of it off, and looks like it's gonna be this nice light color, which is exactly what I was hoping for and what I was going for because of the look that my customer wants to do. So I'm gonna move this one over, and then we're gonna sand the rest of the tops and then continue with some stripping. Before I move on to stripping more off of those dressers, I am going to take a little break and shout out to June's Journey for sponsoring today's video. If you've been around a while, you know that June's Journey is a favorite here on the channel, and I am going to talk about their brand new update to their app. June's Journey is a hidden object mystery game set in the 1920s where you play as June Parker, a self-made detective solving crimes using nothing but her instincts, attention to detail, and a little bit of wit. It's got everything: murder, secrets, betrayal, you name it. What I love about it is that it's not just about finding objects, it's the story that keeps pulling me back in. It reminds me a lot of the crime shows that I love to watch, but this time I'm the detective. And honestly, after spending hours of focusing on tiny furniture details, switching gears to solve a mystery just makes sense. Speaking of details, let's see if you have what it takes to crack a case. I've got two nearly identical crime scene photos from the game, but one crucial clue is different. Can you spot it? All right, time's up. The answer? 3 whiskey glasses. Looks like someone else was with Claire and Harry before they died. Or was it just a coincidence? You tell me. Again, thank you so much to June's Journey for sponsoring today's video. Check out the links down below in the description, or scan the QR code if you're interested in playing the game at all and if you want to solve a little mystery. Let's get back to the flip. Now that the tops are all done and they are sanded and they're looking really good, I'm gonna start moving on to the rest of the pieces. So I'm gonna flip this on its side. I think that it's gonna be best if I work on things vertically instead of horizontally. So if I'm gonna work on this side, I'm gonna go ahead and flip the nightstand onto its side. This will just help the acetone stay on that surface better. And it'll like help me work on it a little bit easier. So yeah, I mean, it's just gonna be the same method pretty much. These nightstands do have like a lot of electrical involved with them, and so there's a little thing on the side here that I've got to figure out what I'm gonna do with, if I'm just gonna tape it off or if I'm gonna remove it and then replace it again. We'll see. But basically time to continue stripping with some acetone. So I got the rest of this one nightstand all stripped with the acetone, and like I don't know if I'll ever do another method for stripping because it's pretty easy, and I got into all of these crevices, all of these spots. Of course, I'm still gonna need to sand it just like I did down on the tops, but like it just goes by really quickly. So I think, you know, this took me probably like an hour and a half of work time that I was working on like actually stripping this whole nightstand. I got the sides all done, and I got the drawers all done, and the fronts all done. So I'm gonna continue with the acetone on the next nightstand before I sand this stuff down. I'm kind of in the mood for some more stripping, so let's get into it. second nightstand is completely stripped as well. And that took me an hour and 20 minutes. So not too shabby on these little guys. Well, they're big but little compared to these two large ones. So I've got my work cut out for me going forward, but I'm thinking because these took me, an hour 20 each, that this one back here is gonna take me probably right around 2 hours. It's for like both of them each. So let's get to work because that's a lot of stripping. All right, it's time to bust out this big guy. I'm gonna start with the tall dresser. But just like the nightstands, I'm gonna lay it on its side. I just think that, again, for the sides that are up and down vertical, I think that acetone will just run right down it and not really be as effective as it would be when it's laying down on its side. So maybe I'm gonna go ahead and take the drawers out to make it a little lighter for myself. And that way, when I am laying it down, it's not so heavy. All right, now that these are out, I am going to, it's gonna be a lot lighter. I'm gonna go ahead and tip this over. Oh yeah, so light, so light. Much better. Now we have this flat surface, and that is where I'm gonna go start applying the acetone, and I am gonna time this one. So start the timer, Harrison. So I wanted to go over the process in depth now that I have been doing it for quite a while now. So we've got pure acetone. You could get this at the hardware store. I got this gallon and 1 more gallon because I wasn't sure like how much I was gonna need per like project basically. So what I do is I just pour a little bit, and it's kind of messy when it pours, but I pour a little bit into a separate container. And then I take a chip brush, and I have some paper towels right here, but I take the chip brush and I begin to apply the acetone, and I have learned already that it needs to be applied in small batches. And this is because the acetone likes to dry pretty quickly, and then it'll dry the stain back up. It'll get sticky really fast, but then it will like harden up again. So then you have to apply more acetone. So in order to get like the best results, doing it in small batches, small sections is the best. So I am just going to apply it in like, I don't know, it's like a foot, like a 12 by 6 area or so. And then with my chip brush, I just like to kind of move it around. This will loosen up the stain, and you'll already be able to see it getting lighter. You can dip your brush as many times as you think you might need to. On the edges especially, it does like to dry up pretty quick because there's not as much product there. So I like to try and kind of douse the edges with more product. Once we kind of get most of the stain loosened up, we'll just take a paper towel and we'll wipe it all back. So although you have to do small section by section, it's like super fast working, and then you just move on to the next section. I don't know. In my opinion, this is a lot quicker and even less messy than like a normal stripper would be. It's quicker because you don't have to let it sit on there for very long, but it is a lot more working time, but it's not that big goopy mess because you just wipe it back with your paper towel. So I don't know, pros and cons of all of the products that I've ever used. Honestly, this one so far has been my favorite, I think. So, and then there we go, section by section. And of course your acetone will start to turn color in there. So like every, once in a while, you may wanna get a new container, get a new chip brush, and start fresh. I've kind of been doing that like on each piece. After each piece, I'll get a new container, or you could like just rinse it out. Make sure you're wearing gloves, a mask, and goggles if you want to as well for eye protection. So this section right here took me right around like 3-ish minutes. So really not bad. And then one of my favorite parts is that it gets like into all of these curves and crevices that can most of the time be pretty difficult to like get into without having to hand sand and all that jazz. Of course, I'm gonna have to hand sand these little crevices, but I'm not gonna be removing finish. I'm just going to be like smoothing out. So it's gonna be a lot different of a process and a lot less hand sanding. See, it just wipes right off. It's kind of crazy. Same stuff that you might use for, you know, removing nail polish, stuff like that. Same stuff. And I pretty much just use the same like paper towel until it can't soak up any more liquid. This is super important. All of the paper towels that you use should not be put into a trash can. I have all mine still laid out on the floor because this, just like any other oil-based product, is combustible. So it's important to like let it dry out for like a few days because it could just spontaneously combust. So even having it here on the floor could be a danger, but it's gonna be much safer out in the open, like airing out, drying out, than it would be if it were like in a trash can, potentially creating heat. So just remember that when you are using this. Any cloths, like any oil-based products you ever use, sustain, polyurethane, stuff like that, lay out your rags. Do not forget that part. You could even put them inside of a bucket filled with water for even more safety. Yeah, all this took me right around like 5 minutes to do that whole section. So I'm just gonna chug away at the rest of it and we'll keep making progress. Still chipping away at these dressers with the acetone. I think I'm about like 2.5-ish hours in to like these bigger dressers, and I've got this body left and then this door and this drawer. So not too much left, but I am out of acetone for the first jug. I got this at Menards for $20 and it was 1 whole gallon and it lasted me like a ton, I think. In my opinion, this was very cheap and it lasted a long time. So if you're doing like one piece of furniture, you will be able to use this on multiple projects. But luckily I wasn't sure how much I was gonna be using, so I did grab another gallon, and I won't use very much of this for the remainder of the project because there's not a ton left. But I just wanted to update you guys on the time and the materials that I'm using. And then I think I'll also have enough paper towels in this one box for me to finish this. And there's 200 in here. This costs about $10. So that is kind of a cost breakdown for you, at least for what I personally paid. I mean, altogether $50. Of course, I'm not going to use the whole 2nd gallon of acetone, so maybe we'll call it like $10 of that, even though it's probably not even $10, but just to be on the safe side. So I'm going to refill my container and keep on chipping away. I am officially done with the acetone on everything, and I'll leave the time on the screen for the time that it took to take just these 2 larger dressers down to the raw finish. And then of course it did still take like that 3 hours-ish for the nightstands. So I don't know, I think we're all in around like 5 or 6 hours of stripping. But again, I still think that it was the right way to go. Either way, stripping all of this finish off is gonna take some time. You just gotta find the best method for you. Acetone might not be the best method for you. You could wanna sand, you could wanna use a real stripper or like an actual paint stripper. But whatever works for you, got it done, and now we're moving on to the next part, which is going to be sanding. I already sanded down the tops, but they definitely got some drips of the acetone when I was, doing it on the sides and stuff like that. So I'm gonna definitely re-sand the tops, but I'm gonna whip out my surf prep, and I'm gonna be using a combination of my foam abrasive pads to get just like around the creases and edges, and then also just my regular flat sanding pad as well. So this is probably gonna take quite a bit of time again, but it's gonna take way less time of sanding than it would have if I was actually sanding through the entire finish, which I'm not. Doing pretty good on the sanding portion. I have all 4 of the dresser shells, like the shells, the bodies of the dressers and nightstands, all sanded down at least as much as I can with my surf prep. I just need to go back and do a little bit of hand sanding. So next up, I am going to begin working on the drawers. We've got 5, 13, 22 drawers, or 21 drawers and 1 door front. So got my work cut out for me, but I think it's gonna go pretty quickly. Again, I'm so glad that I went ahead and got all of the finish off. Now we're just smoothing everything out and getting all of the remnants off. So I think this method is just the best method. Really the only thing is, like, this set is huge and there's a lot of there's a lot of parts to it, a lot of crevices, a lot of details, and so even when I'm sanding everything, I still need to be careful so that I'm not, like, compromising any of those details. So, like, on the drawers, I'm about to start, there is, you know, all of these raised curved edges and things like that, and the flat middles. So I'm going around and I'm using a combination of my flat 180 grit, and then I'm also using my sponge abrasive, and I'm using my sponge interface pad. So tons of different sanding things that go onto my sander, and it's making this job a lot easier. So shout outs to Surf Prep. And if you're interested in a Surf Prep, the links are down below in the description. You can use my code FFT10 to get some money off of your purchase. I love mine. I actually bought mine on my own before I even was in contact with the Surf Prep team, and I loved it ever since then, that I bought mine with my own money, and that's why I recommend it to you. I wouldn't recommend something that I didn't love, and this I truly do love. And plus, the Surf Prep team is also A1, so that's always a great sign to, like, for me to back a family-owned company and recommend them to you guys. It doesn't go without saying that they are amazing. All right, you guys, I have officially finished sanding, and that just took quite a long time, especially with all of the details of the drawers, but we got it done, and now we can finally move on to some of the final steps. So the acetone and the sanding were the biggest parts of this set of, like, refinishing it, and those were the most important ones because the whole goal was to get that old dark finish off of the pieces, and now we have our lighter color finish. But instead of just top coating this, we are going to apply a stain over the top of it. I am going to do a light stain because we are going for a Pottery Barn finish. In the finish, it's called Sea Drift. So if you look up the Sausalito Pottery Barn dressers, it's pretty popular right now, and the Sea Drift finish is really what they want on their pieces. So I have done a little bit of testing and I have found the perfect stain that I'm gonna use. I'm not sure 100% if I'm gonna do a stain and then another stain over the top, or if I'm just gonna call it good at the first stain. So the first stain is going to go on all of the pieces first, and then we'll decide if I'm going to put on the second stain to kind of warm it up a little bit, or if we're just gonna go straight into the top coat. So the reason I don't want to just go straight into the top coat on the raw wood is because it would be way too much of a yellow tone. So we need to tone that down a little bit. There's not going to be a huge difference between the non-stained surfaces and the stained surfaces, but there will be a difference in the long run, like once you put top coat on it. So I'm going to show you the stain I'm going to use, and then I'm going to get to work applying it to all of these pieces. Okay, so I have used this stain on some other projects in the past, but typically I use it over the primer that is made by the same product line. So I'm going to be using the stain called Retique It. They also have a wooden primer that basically creates your surface to be wood. It has wood fibers in it, but you can use their stains on any product or any piece that you want, and it's just like a normal stain. So this is a gel stain. The color is called Pickled Oak, so it's pretty light, but this is exactly what we need to kind of eliminate that yellow tone that the pieces are giving right now. So I'll link all this down below, but the Retique It wooden stain is what I'm using in the color Pickled Oak, and I'm just gonna be applying it with a brush. This is the brush I'm going to be applying it with, and it is the Retique It brush, but I'm not gonna be wiping it back in any way, because as long as I do it nice and light and even, it's actually perfect coverage, and I don't want to wipe any of it back, or else it would be really difficult to even tell that something was on there. So let's get some pickled stain on there. And I am about a half a quart full here, and this is all I have. This is a pretty big surface area that I've got, but I'm pretty sure, since I'm not using a ton on each surface area, that I should have plenty of stain to go the whole way. Cross my fingers for it. First round of staining with the Pickled Oak gel stain is all complete, and it's looking really, really good. I did go ahead and send a photo of this to my client just to see what she was thinking so far. And again, I'm trying to match it to the sea drift look from Pottery Barn, and I asked her if this is looking good or if she wanted to go a shade darker, and she did want to go a shade darker, so I am going to be using Retiket's Barnwood, but this is not a gel stain. It's sort of like a gel stain, but it's a lot less thick. It's still water-based, and it's like, I don't know if you're gonna be able to tell in here, but it's like way more runny. Yeah, like that. It's like way more runny. It's like a liquid versus the jelly consistency. So I am going to be using a brush still to apply this, and I think what's gonna look the best is if I kind of brush it on in small sections and then use a towel to kind of wipe back any excess. So we're gonna do this on all of the surfaces just like we did the pickled oak stain, and this will be our last step until we are ready for the top coat. So this will help us achieve the final color, and then we'll be able to seal it all up. I got all of the drawers stained, loving it. Now I'm moving on to the actual bodies of the dresser, the nightstands and stuff. And I do have several different wood grain patterns that like go this way, and it worked out just fine with the other gel stain to just kind of brush it in the way of the wood grain, and it really melted into the surface nicely. But this other stain is going to not necessarily show streak marks, but show streak marks in a good way, but I don't want to get the streak marks going the wrong direction or like the opposite direction of the wood grain. So I have used some painter's tape to tape off the different areas, so that way I am not risking any of the streaks going different ways. So I've got the smaller areas all taped off, the sides taped off, and I'll start there. And then once that dries, I will go ahead and take the tape off and retape it to get the other areas in the other direction of the wood grain. I find that it's actually going to save time to tape off. Even though it does take a little bit of extra time, it's gonna save time and look way better if you take the time to tape off the sections like this. You guys, it is finally time for top coat on this set. I'm so thrilled that we are so far along on this set. It has been quite a project. We'll just leave it at that. But it's time for top coat, and I am going to be using the General Finishes High Performance Flat Top Coat. I don't really want it to become shiny. I think that the kind of more dull, not dull, but like flat look, the matte look, is gonna look the best on the pieces here with the wood look. So I have my Wagner, I'm gonna hook it up to my Wagner Flexio 5000, but this is just one of the nozzles that I have. Again, I love that they are interchangeable because sometimes I like to just use it for top coat and no paint colors, sometimes primer, sometimes just paint. So this is perfect for that. And then of course, always gonna strain it in there because I wanna make sure that there's no chunks. This can has been sitting on the shelf over there for a little while, so you know, you never know what can happen while it's just chilling. So I just want to make sure, you know, I've given it a good stir, but there's definitely a few chunkers in there, so I'm gonna want to strain those out as much as possible so it doesn't clog my strainer or my sprayer later on. This is super thin, so I am not going to need to like thin it out at all with water. This is gonna be just straight out of the can, right into the sprayer, and then I'll definitely need to adjust some of my settings to make sure that it's not like pushing out too much top coat, because if you push out too much top coat and it's super thin and runny like this, then that could cause dripping, and we definitely want to avoid that because I do not want to redo any of this at all. So I'm going to be super careful and cautious of my settings for the sprayer. All right, and now that that is all strained in there, I'm going to go ahead and spin on the top here, get this hooked up to the Flexio 5000 and get to spraying on the top coat. Since it's just top coat, I'm not really worried about like overspray on everything. So I'm gonna leave out my pieces and we're just gonna spray them out in the open here. I've got my drawers all lined up behind me and then all the larger pieces as well. I'm so excited to see this come together, and then putting the hardware on is gonna be so rewarding. Now that I got the top coat on, it's time to start assembling these and getting the hardware on. And so I'm gonna start with this big guy here. I'm gonna go ahead and start putting the drawers back in, and then we'll get the hardware installed. Super excited. I have been working on this set for over 3 weeks now, on and off, not full speed ahead, but gradually over the past 3 weeks. And I am so happy to say that it is finally finished. It has been through a lot, but it came out exactly the way that I imagined, and I've been sending photos over to my client and she is absolutely loving the photos, so I cannot wait to show her in person. We just got dumped on with snow, so I'm not sure when I am going to be delivering these or them picking them up, but I'm so glad that this set is finished. Let's talk about the numbers and then the overall process as a whole. So just as a little bit of a recap, this was a custom set that I went and picked up from my client's house. They live about 20 to 25 minutes away, so it took me probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours, including like loading up and unloading and all of that jazz. And I did charge $100 for that service. And they haven't quite decided if I'm gonna go deliver these or if they're gonna pick them up, but if I deliver them, it'll be another $100. So this set came to me as a dark set, and they wanted to lighten it up. They're doing a little bit of remodeling in their home, and they just thought that their dark set was still such good quality that they did not want to lose what they had in the storage and the actual pieces, but they just wanted to lighten it up a little bit, and they wanted a Pottery Barn look in the color like Sea Drift, the Sausalito dressers that are so popular right now. This look is very highly requested from refinishers around the world, and I'm so happy that I was able to do this for a client and actually save them quite a bit of money. Again, this set was in very nice condition, and a lot of it is solid wood, or at least has really nice thick veneer over the top of some particle board areas. All the drawers slid in really nice and things like that. So actually, cosmetically, there was nothing wrong with them. We were just changing the look or the coloring. So I needed to do a whole bunch of work to get this color, and the first thing that I did was strip off the finish using the acetone. Now that method was really fun to me, honestly. Like, it did take a while, but with all of these different curves and lines and indents and different things like that, I just thought that stripping first was going to give me the best method to get that finish off before sanding. I still had to sand, so I did that next. The acetone cost me around $40 for the 2 gallons, and I pretty much went all the way through the 2 gallons. I do have a little bit left in that second gallon. Next, I took my Surf Prep sander along with a lot of hand sanding, and I went to town getting all of the rest of the finish off, which there wasn't much, but the acetone doesn't necessarily take away all of the color. There's still going to be a small amount of coloring on the surface, so I sanded all of that back and made sure that everything was nice and smooth with like a 180 grit, and I was able to use a lot of the Pro Foam abrasives that fit right onto my Surf Prep and get along these curves. But then, like I said, I did have to use my hand sanding blocks and things like that to get into the really fine details and corners of each and every drawer. I would estimate that I spent around $25 on sandpaper. Luckily, I already had the sanding blocks and things like that to help me get into the details, so that wasn't an added on cost. After I had all of it sanded down, it was time to go to town figuring out what method I wanted to do to get this final Pottery Barn look. I really wanted to make sure to get the right shade of the tannish color, because there's so many different products out there and you just never know how you're gonna achieve a look until you start practicing. So I went to my stash and I had some Retique It gel stain on hand, and it was in the color Pickled Oak, so I went ahead and put that on the entire surface, and that just took a lot of the yellow tones out of the wood that I got once I was finished sanding. Kind of neutralized everything and gave it a nice base coat. So then when I was going in with the darker gel stain alternative, I was able to achieve this look. Just the Pickled Oak was a bit too light for my client, and I agreed, but I wanted to make sure that she was on the same page, so I sent her over a photo. She wanted to warm it up just a little bit, so that's when I went in with the Barnwood gel stain alternative, and we covered the entire surface with that as well. Both of those stains cost me in total around $80. So that wasn't a huge cost into the actual finishing of the color of this set. But then I did add on a top coat because those stains did not have a top coat built in. I loaded up my spray gun with the General Finishes High Performance Flat Top Coat. And although it is a flat, which means it's not as protective as maybe a satin or a gloss would be, the General Finishes is high performance, and I can totally tell that there is a top coat on it, and it is going to be well protected for years to come. The top coat costs me $30 on Amazon, so that is another added cost. And then of course, last but not least is the hardware cost. And a lot of the times, if you're switching out hardware, especially on a large set like this, one, you want to make sure that you're getting high quality hardware so that it's not going to, like, I don't know, not work over time. But if you're replacing a ton, it tends to be the most expensive expense, the highest expense of the project, maybe besides the actual cost of the furniture if you're purchasing that, you know, on Facebook Marketplace or the thrift store. The hardware cost for this whole set, between all the knobs and then the handles, was $125. So we're in for a total of $300 for materials on this entire 4-piece set. I will say, and this does tend to happen to me a lot, let me know down below in the comments if it also happens to you a lot, I underestimated how much work and time that this set was going to take me. It was a lot larger than I originally thought it was, and when I went and picked it up, I was like, wow, this is a huge, beefy set, but we got it done, and I am really glad that I ended up charging as much as I did up front. I always like to give a range, so I gave a price range of $2,500 to $2,800, and that was before any type of like pickup or drop off, before and after the project was finished. So I am gonna go ahead and fully charge them the $2,800 because of the length of time that this project took me in general. I didn't fully track it, but if I had to guess, I would probably be around 40 hours into this project. And then with the $300 of materials that I spent, that gives me a total profit of $2,500, which I think in this case scenario, I totally earned because this set took a lot of time and 40 hours of work and a lot of materials. So I'm super pleased with that outcome. I also get asked a lot if I am factoring in my labor costs, and I know that there's so many different ways that you can view the, you know, labor costs versus profit, etc. So if you want to know, that hourly rate would be around $62.50 per hour if I am earning that full $2,500 for the 40 hours of work. So not too shabby in my opinion. I'm really, really pleased with the way that this turned out. Again, all of my links will be listed down below in the description for all the products that I used in this project. I think that it went really smoothly. I definitely will be using the acetone again. Let me know down below also if you have used acetone or if you plan to use it now that you see how it works. Just remember that you do have to keep a wet surface or it will start to gum up pretty quick. So you want to work in those smaller sections. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this longer video, and I'll see you next Thursday for another furniture flip. And I'll see you on the flip side. One more big shout out to June's Journey for sponsoring today's video. You can check out the link down below in the description to see how you can download the app today.